and get everything. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Duran and we're gonna get started for this week.
All right. So me and Justin talked and we wanted to see where you guys are kind of at with HTML. Just kind of like go over a little review. So if you go to Code.hs and you go under assignments, I guess I share my screen. So if you go to Code.hs and you go to assignments, and then if you click on HTML structuring websites, there's a quiz you can take. Shouldn't take too long.
Yeah, it's just 10 multiple choice questions.
So if you like take like 4 or 5 minutes, or
yeah, it works.
Just go through this, and then we'll go through the questions together.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, so if you guys can, go ahead and go to Code.hs and take that quiz. If you have questions, feel free to speak up. We're here to help and stuff, but I just wanted to see kind of where everybody's at, if there's anything we need to go over. There are a couple questions on there that it's okay if you don't know the answer. I guess that I don't know if we covered very in depth. So just see what you think. And then in about 5 minutes, we'll go over it all together. And then if you guys have any trouble getting to Code.hs or finding it, please speak up, say something, and we'll help you get there.
Yep.
Which quiz is that?
It should be structuring websites, 2.11.
If you're under assignments, and you go to HTML structuring websites, and then click on 2.11, and you'll see it right here.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I better take the quiz too and make sure I know what the answers are. I looked at it this morning. Let's see. Yeah, Jeremy. Is that what you needed, Jeremy? Okay, cool. Awesome. All right.
All right, does anyone need more time? Okay, I'll
Good.
just make that as a no.
Right.
Oh,
Oh, you need some more time, Charles?
I'll give you
All good.
a couple more minutes. That's fine.
And like I said, don't freak out if you don't know the answer to a couple of these. They are a little tricky, actually. They're kind of meant to trick you up in some ways. All right. How's it going, Charles? Need a little bit more time or? Awesome. All right, cool. Let's start going over it and see how you did.
All right, does anyone know what number 1 is?
Oh, wow, this is a quiz.
Karen,
Hi.
it's time for a quiz.
Oh, Lord.
Yep, correct.
Last
It's the last one. Make sure you open and close your tags.
Yep.
And that they're facing the right direction.
Real quick, Karen, if you wanted to follow along, we're just in CodeHS.
Okay.
Inside of the structuring HTML, there's a quiz at the end, 2.11.
Okay. Cool.
It's right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is correct. The last one. So if you see, like, if you go back to the question 1 real quick, like some of them, that B in that case, the second one, it'll kind of trip some people up because it doesn't have the slash included in the closing tag. And then C, it's not a self-closing element. So yeah. Cool.
For number 2, we never talked about the domain or the path.
Did anybody by chance figure out what did they have for this? Curious to see what everybody came up with, because yeah, we didn't really talk about this. Feel free to speak up and use your mic or type or whatever works for you guys. Unless we didn't get any answer. Thought it was B. D. Any other guesses or submissions?
What do you have, Justin?
I had, oh geez, now I have to read it again to make sure. I had the first one.
That's what I also, yeah.
Yep. So the reason for that is, and this is just because we never talked about it. So a domain is basically where the website is. In terms of like where, so whenever you click on CodeH, or when you go to codehs.com, that is the location of this CodeHS site. Everything after the .com usually or .ca or whatever, country or .org gov. Everything after that is telling the browser like, okay, where do I need to look? Like which file am I looking at? Sorry, sorry. Yeah, it's not B. It's that first one is it's D. I was just trying to explain that it's not B because it's not missing the slash. But yeah, so your domain is where the website is, and then the path of the URL is the location of the file. So if you think of like a website being a structure, like a folder structure, so inside of a website, you have a bunch of folders with different files. So for like Code.js, you could even think of like, if you look at the top, the courses, sections, sandbox, like those are different folders that contain a bunch of different files. And so that's your path at the top to say like, this is where I need to go to display this content.
Anyone on this one? Let's see.
Yep, you got a couple of C's.
Correct. It is C. What do you guys have for this one?
This one's a little tricky. A's. Did we have anything but A's? Well, lots of A's. Yep, and it looks like the majority of you are correct. It is A. Can anybody tell me, I guess, why it's A? Like what makes it correct, I guess?
H1 makes the heading really big. And as the numbers get bigger, the font gets smaller.
Yep, exactly. It's always, I remember whenever I was first learning this, I always thought that was weird that the bigger the number, the smaller the letters, but that's just the way it works.
All right.
I don't know if, Adam, I don't know if H1 is the length of the page. I don't know. I honestly don't know what determines the size. I think it's just a set like font size, but it's always H1 is the biggest one. And then as you, like you said, as you increase the number, it goes down.
Yeah, it's just header size 1.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this next one is something that we didn't cover as much, but yeah, I'm curious to see what you guys got on this question 5 too, what you came up with. Any thoughts on question 5? Anybody got a guess to throw out there? Got B. Anybody else? Any other guesses? B. Got 2 different ones. Any other ones? All right. So for this one, it actually is D. And the reason for that is it's asking what classifies as metadata. And if you want to think like metadata is not generally stuff that's going to be shown on the page. So in this case, Everything that's inside of the web page. Wait, I'm pretty sure it's a D. I want to make sure. Duran, is it D?
I thought it was A, but I might be wrong actually.
All right, now I gotta look it up. I thought it was D. Learning on the go. I guess I could take, hold on. I could submit it and see if I got it wrong. Okay, it is D. That's what I thought. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So the reason for that is everything else is going to be shown inside of the body of the page, right? So your tags, like if you're going to put a table or a list, that's going to be in the body. Metadata is not necessarily something that's going to show up. So in that case, when we put the title that goes in, generally that's going to go like in the head of your HTML. And that just shows up on the title of like the tab in your browser. So like for this one, for the page that we're actually looking at, the title of this HTML page is take quiz, and then a little pipe code HS. That's where the title would be. So it's not necessarily on the page anywhere. It's just up there at the top.
Yeah. What do you guys have for this one?
See, you see. Right.
Yeah. Correct. It is C. Href is.
So href would be a link. So
Yeah.
this would have, instead of showing the image, it would link to the image. Like you would have to click on it and then go see the image. So if we're trying to actually display an image,
Yes.
you want to use the image tag. And the reason it's C in this case is because the image is actually what they call a self-closing tag. So you don't need the one at the end. You just need the one image and then a source attribute. All right, now we got a list question. Now I want to hear from somebody who hasn't put in an answer yet, because we've got a few people that haven't said anything. So, excuse me, I'm curious if you haven't put anything in, what did you have for number 7? Don't be shy. Anybody got one? What about, I want to say A? Oh, Jeremy direct message me, but he says A. Anybody else got one? C from Adam.
Yeah. Correct. It
Oh,
is
C.
C. So by default, order list is always going to be numbers unless you change the type of the ordering.
Yep. So Jeremy, if yours would have been right if it said unordered list. So if it was a UL instead of OL, that's where A would have come into play. That's with an unordered list. But since it's an ordered list, the OL, it's going to start with the numbers 1, 2, 3.
When would what would be the tag for the lines or the letters?
So in this case, it would be so for the lines, it would be an unordered list. So it'd be UL, but then it would have a type attribute on the ordered list or unordered list, and it would be like dash. So you can change the type, because that's where on an unordered list you can have the regular bullet points, the square bullet points, like an open circle. That's how you tell it the different kinds. And then the same thing goes for the ordered list, just different things. So for ABC, for example, you would have OL, and then inside of that OL tag, you would have a type equals lowercase a, and that would give you ABC in lowercase letters. And if you want, I mean, we can like actually work that out if you wanted to see it too.
It's okay, thank you.
All right.
All right, so this one's a little bit tricky. It takes some time to figure out which one's doing what. But what everybody get for number 8, creating the table. This is what we went over last week. Adam says B. Anybody else? Trisha also says B. Seem to have a consensus on the second one, and I would say you're right.
Yep.
So this one is pretty tricky. There's a few different ways that the different ones try to trick you up. For example, the first one, it's just showing that title artist linked as table data, but in the actual table, it's a header, and so that's the difference between A and B. So we want B here because it's got the header. And if you scroll down to this C, what it's doing is in each row, so you see we have title, CGM memory, which is correct. That first row is correct. But the second one, it's saying the artist and then each artist name. So that would say, like going across the table would be like artist, Rooney, Pitchfork, and Tom Mish going across. And then the last one, if I remember right, what was it doing? It was, what was the issue with that one? Same thing, except it didn't have the headers all the way either. So it was kind of wrong in both ways.
Mismatch.
Yep. Awesome.
And the
One
last
more
question.
question.
Oh, go ahead. Last question. So. No, we didn't cover this either, but what do you guys have for this one?
Charles says D. Anybody else? Going once, twice, sold to Charles. And you get it correct with D. So yeah, if you have an HTML page hosted at some domain, any browser on any device should be able to view that web page, because all browsers and devices use the same protocols for sending, receiving, and viewing those web pages. That's kind of what we talked about before, saying like I can open that HTML file within any browser on anything you want. So your phones, tablets, computers, as long as you open it up in like Chrome or Safari or Firefox, it'll be able to understand it and read it. It's not possible.
Good job, guys. Let's see. So next we're going to go over some CSS. So we've been doing some CSS already, just having some inline CSS where we have the style tag and next to our elements. But there's also, you can also have your CSS inside of a I'm going too fast, never mind. Okay.
So let's start with what is CSS, right? That first little paragraph tells us a little bit about it. Basically, it's called cascading tiles. I can't even say it. Cascading style sheets is what it stands for. And basically, it just allows us to create more complicated in-depth styles for our HTML elements. And like Duran said, we've been using styles before. So now we're going to take those things and expand on it.
Okay. So like we discussed before, the syntax for CSS. You have your element, and then you have the brackets, and then the property and the value. So for example, color is a property, and value is blue. You can have multiple styles within an element.
And that selector piece, that first one, when it says selector, what that's saying is like, okay, what am I looking for? So in that first example, the P color blue, font size 12, that's saying all of the paragraphs that I'm going to use should be blue and have a 12-point font. So this is a way to, instead of what we were doing before, where we had to write a style for each individual thing, we could just say, okay, for the rest of the page, make all of the paragraphs this font or this color. And it saves us a lot of time typing stuff like that.
Four, five.
I don't think we're going to get that far yet with the whole new style sheet yet today.
That's.
I don't think. It's all just in the head, putting your style.
That's what this was, yeah. It's fine. Okay. So using CSS, like we've done before, you have your style inside of the element you want. You have the different selections for that style. You want to make sure it's also inside of the same single quotes. And you're gonna have,
so this is what. Sorry, this is what it would look like before. This is what we've learned, and then below that is going to show what it looks like in this new kind of format of styling.
yeah, so you have a style tag inside of your header where So you can have all your styles inside of a single element, and you have for every single element that'll appear inside of your HTML page, you can have a style for it. So every single header one element will be stylized. And if you have an image, it's going to have the width predefined already.
Always fun finding an image. There was some in that in the code example from the HTML page if you want to look at that too.
Sure.
You just wanted to grab that code, actually, the whole thing would work. Also, it's totally not a dog, even though it says it. It's not big. So if you notice that border, I didn't even notice that the first time. It's adding that little left side border to your headings. Very neat.
Is it something not closed?
No, it's working.
Oh,
Yeah, everything's right.
it's weird now.
So,
yeah, as you can see, everything that's within the style element will carry over to everything in your code.
so let's jump over to the Code.js examples then. Oh, there's a few that we can check out. Let's go into let's jump to the select by tag. Or sorry, no, told you wrong. The introduction. And then we'll do the list styling exercise real quick. So if you want to follow along, we're gonna try to go through this kind of together as a class, but in Code.js, we're gonna move into that CSS section, and in the introduction, there's different exercises that we can do. And so here it's gonna show you, like this is the goal, right? It's gonna tell you that you modify it. So we wanna make the header green, and then the list tags the list items have a font of 18 pixels. And then we go ahead and try to do that. So let's go for it. You can do it within the exercise. Yeah, just hit the let's go, and it'll bring it up. So it already has most of the code there for you. And let's just see what we need to do. So let's run it for the first time. Awesome. So let's start with the first thing. What we want to make that header green. That one's a little a little too easy. It's just make the color green in that case. So we go in, we find that H1 style because that's what's being used, and then we change the color to green. The next thing, pretty straightforward again on this one. It wants it to be 18 pixels. So we'll just change them, and it's already there for you. And it tells you where it needs to go. So the list item, let's make all those 18 pixels. I think you need to put the PX on there too. Or maybe it already is. Cool. And then the next one was a little bit more complicated. That's one we're going to try to see if you guys can do. Endangered animals. All right. Is there a way to see the, can you go to test cases on the right? Does that show the actual assignment? Or maybe it's assignment.
Yeah.
There we go. Awesome. That's what I was looking for. So you can see it at the same time. Okay, so what we've got here is, it says it's quickly choose 4 animals from a list, and it's going to give you a list in a Wikipedia page. And then we're going to create a list of these things and give them some styles. So let's click on that Wikipedia link and see what our options are for endangered animals. Oh, that's small. The big
There's one
list.
there.
Okay, what's your guys' favorite animal on the list? Can you zoom in a little bit? They're on.
Is that better?
There's a lot of bats, apparently. I think we need a bat. Let's do,
Bumblebee bat?
the bumblebee bat. That sounds cool. Yeah, we're gonna do that one. We'll just keep track of what we got here. Okay, let's grab 3 more real quick. Different names from that list. All right, no more bats. Let's do a bear. Bears are cool. Let's just do a grizzly bear. And then if anybody else sees something cool on the list, I know it doesn't show too many at once, just say something or post it and we'll throw that on the list too. What else we got? There was some cats on there. Cheetahs are cool. Let's do cheetah.
Every animal.
Penguin. All right, let's do penguins. Any specific kind? I like emperor penguins. They're probably endangered. Let's do those. Let's do emperor penguins. All right, let's see. Are they endangered? I guess I could have been helping you by looking at the list too the whole time. That's okay. They're not on the list, but oh well. Penguins it is. All right, is that our 4? That's 4. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so we got our 4 animals. Now we need to display some information. So the first thing it's asking us to do is make a page that has a header, tag, and H2 tag for each of the animals. And then under each header, we're going to put an unordered list for the scientific name, where they are, and if it's endangered or threatened. So let's start with that. So for each one, we'll need a heading 2 and whatever name, whatever animal it is. This is a nice little piece of advice. As Duran is doing this, as you can see, he built the first one roughly with the scientific name, lives in, the stuff that you're going to need to repeat, and then copy paste, because it makes it a lot faster that way. So we got what? Bumblebee bat, cheetah, there's a grizzly bear, and an emperor penguin. Since it's not on the list, I'll send you the emperor penguin stuff.
All right.
Okay, so I put the scientific name in chat for that. I don't know if I'm gonna try to say it.
Yeah, that's hard to say.
They live in Antarctica and they are near threatened. Cool. So now most of the legwork for that stuff is done. So I'm gonna see if I need a volunteer for someone to help with the styling part. And we'll see if we can walk through it. Does anyone want to volunteer? How do you turn all the circles into squares? Oh, okay, yeah, so let's do that real quick. Before we get there. So let's turn them into squares. I think it's just square. So on your unordered list, you add your type attribute, and then you tell it which type you want. So in this case, it'd just be squares. So if you run that, I think you have to go to the output tab. If you see, it's kind of hard to see on a small screen, but the first one, phone will be back. Now has squares. And you can do that with all of them. So you can do, what is it, circle? I think it's like an open circle. And dash will probably be the dash, just like the other one. Oh, maybe not.
I don't think there's a dash.
Sorry, I just sneezed. Yeah, I guess maybe there's not. I don't know. Cool. Does that help with the changing types and stuff? Any other questions before we go to the style part of this? All right, like I said, I think we should see, anybody want to volunteer to walk through it, and we'll walk you through it and make sure we get everything going. To get the style part. It's pretty short. There's not too much to do. If no one wants to volunteer, I may have to pick on somebody. All right, I'm gonna pick on, what am I picking on today? Let's see. Options. Adam. Let's walk through this. Can you do that? Can you help us out real quick? Yes, no, maybe so. Silence in the crowd. Maybe, maybe not. All right, I don't know if Adam's there or can hear. Let's go with, all right, Trisha, you're next on my list. So you're up. Ready to lead. Awesome. Okay, it's not that hard. I'm just gonna have you kind of walk us through. You're gonna be Duran's brain, I guess, and telling him what he needs to do.
No.
And then I'll.
Uh-oh.
So, yep, here we go. You get it. You got to tell him what to do. So, what we're trying to do is it says we're gonna set the style. So modify the body style to set the background color to that hex color, and then set the font size. So what are we going? Oh wow, it's already like halfway done too.
Yeah.
Man, this is really easy. This is easier than I thought. Dang, I spent more time trying to find a volunteer. That's all right. All right.
To do the background color, would you put the cursor like right where it says, and would it be like, instead of a colon, would it just be like equals and then the hashtag FFD1AA?
So normally when you're doing inline styles like we did before, it would be like equals and then the hashtag. So it would be, yeah, Jerome, I'll show you real quick. When you say like style equals, but when we're creating the style at the top, it's just so the way it's set up would be background color colon, and then whatever style you want to make it, or whatever color you want to make it.
So you would just put the hashtag there instead?
Yep. Exactly. So yeah, you want to throw that color up on the line 7 there.
And then I'm gonna assume that you have to do the same thing for the font size, just put 18.
Cool.
And then you don't need it in line 15 anymore, right? Because it's.
Exactly. Yep. So that's gonna, affect the body. So actually, since he added the style on the header, now technically, since it's a background color, it's not going to do anything. But like if you were to change the color of the header, that's what it would affected the names of the, oh boy, now you're not going to be able to read it on that first one.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it disappeared because you made the color of the text the same color as the background. So
Oh, I changed it a bit. It's different. I don't know how different. Oh, there you go.
there you go. That's different. Yeah, man, here I was thinking, I was trying to find somebody to volunteer because I didn't think any of that stuff at the top was done. Wi-Fi crashed. All right, you're back. Cortez is back. Awesome. All right. That is that exercise. Let's try to find something more challenging, maybe. Okay, here we go. We're gonna keep going with that actually. So I hope you saved that because there's another challenge, there's another exercise for style the headers. So if you go into CSS select by tag in the bottom, there is, no, go back.
Not this one.
Farther down, yeah. I'm skipping it a little bit because these are too easy. Down farther, a little bit more. There you go. 327. Let's do that one. And then take the code from the one we just worked on and paste it in here. Once you get to the, awesome. Okay, so our assignment this time, it's still pretty simple. We're gonna make a rule to change the color of H1s and H2. Also, something we kind of left out from the last one is we should have an H1 in the beginning of the page that's the endangered species. All right, so how do we do that? What's the first step if I wanted to create a style for the H1? Crickets. It's okay if you don't know. Anybody have any ideas? No? On where to start? H1, yep, perfect, Charles. Exactly what we need to do. H1, open, close, curly braces. Okay, and then we'll do the same for H2 because we're making a rule for that also. So if we want to change the font color, we kind of just went over it. What attribute do we change? What are we going to put in there? Give you a hint. It may or may not be color. Yeah, so it's just going to be color in this case. So there's not a font color attribute. It's just called color because you're just giving a color to that element. And in this case, if it's just a text element, like at H1, color is just going to tell you which color the text is supposed to be. I think you got an extra hashtag on the end of 11, unless it's supposed to be there.
Yeah. So, yes, it's the fifth one.
Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it is font color.
No, I think they meant green. That's right. That's what they wanted. That's what the people want. Oh, okay.
Where'd it go? Did you get it to work? Did you get the color to change?
Yeah, it was a change color. It was just
Oh, I did.
It was like really subtle, just like a light green.
Oh, I can't see that at all. It looks black on my screen. All right, let's just change it to something else. Let's make it blue. 'Cause I can't even see it. There we go. Okay, it does work. On my screen, it just looks black still. Awesome. So that kind of shows again, like the different ways you can do colors. So we have the hashtag, the hexadecimal color option where you can get an exact color, or if you just want something like blue, red, light blue, you can do that also. Awesome. Are there any questions so far on like creating styles and up in, you know, for your tags and all that stuff? Not. We can, Durham, we can move on. We could go back to the HTML and then move into classes.
Okay. So when you're going about styling your page, you can add classes towards your elements so that you can easily call upon them when you go about styling your page. So for example, here you have a class being added to your div. So when you go back into stylize, you can call upon that class and style it. Oh, here it is. So when you're stylizing a class, you're gonna have a dot in front of it and then the name. Pretty much the same as when you're stylizing an element. Same format, yes. Leaving out.
Yep, it's the same format. But what this is used for is, so say I have two divs in this case, right? But I want them to have separate styles. So what we were working on for the first part of class was like, okay, what if I want to make all of my headers one color, or all of my paragraphs, you know, have a border around them? This is how we get around, like, what if I want to do a bunch of different stuff, you know, depending on where it is in the page. And so you define your class just like before, except you put a dot in front of it to it just tells the code that's like, okay, this is a class, not a regular tag style. And then if you look down on lines 10 and 11, on whatever tag you are trying to style, you create a class and you say what the name of that class is. So in this case, on each div, we add the I am a class class on top of it.
This is also how you like save work also. You write a single class. You write a style for a single class, and you add that class to multiple elements. to easily stylize it. And also lets you pull in custom style pages from other people. For example, here, this is like a built-in style class. That you can add to the element. Any questions about that? Okay. So here you have two classes, A and B, and they have two different colors. What color do you guys think it will be? This div.
Yeah, let's just try it and see. So what happened here is we put both of these classes on there. The first one is going to underline the text and color it red, and the second one's going to color it blue. And so the text can't be red and blue at the same time. So one has to take precedence over the other. So the way styles work is it's an order of how it was applied, I guess, if you want to think of it that way. So if I change the text to one color, it's whatever the last one is wins. So in this case, the blue wins because it was the last style that was applied here. So if you switch them from, like if you switch the order to BA or red, blue in that case.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. If you switch the order of the class to B and then A, it'll be red under, maybe not. Now I just don't know. Oh, interesting. Can you
I think
move that line, one line up? Is it a definition order?
I think, doesn't it, is it cancel? I'm not sure. I think it just cancels. Is it, or is
You're
it-
not using that B class in that point, at that point. Okay, so let's simplify this because the A and B does make it a little confusing. Let's do a quick example of two different divs that are different colors, right? You can just type green in there, yeah. Okay, so what we've done here is we've defined a class on line 5 called red. Like we said before, the dot notifies that it's like if this is a class name. And then inside of that class, we've said, okay, underline the text and color it red. So later, if we want to use that style, we add a class attribute to something, in this case, a div, and name it that class red. And so it's now this div on line 10 is going to have the style from the red class. Same thing for green, except all we've done is color it green for that style. And then we called that second div on line 11 green. And what this is allowing us to do is basically add different styles to different divs. So if you added a third div and used class green on it and did something else, you would also get green text. Does that make sense? If you have questions, please ask, because this is this part, the class stuff is the main part of CSS. This is pretty key to how the styling works with CSS. So if you don't understand, please let us know.
Okay.
Hey, Meta, does that make sense? Did that explain what you needed?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, just check.
Yeah, but
Can we go back to that example? I wanted to try something really quick.
Yeah.
The same. So if we called so if we did red and green on the same one, like before, I'm assuming it's going to be green with an underline, because of that. So what if you move green to line 5, like swap line 6 and 5, I guess, just in the order that they're defined. Okay, I think that's what it is.
that's whatever's last.
So yeah, it's whatever's the last definition, right, in this case. But I was just curious to see how it works. So yeah, that's what if you want to have multiple styles, they can override each other, is kind of what this means. So that's where we're going to get into the second part of this to prevent that from happening.
And IDs are just pretty much the same thing as classes, except you're using a hashtag when you're actually stylizing it. And the ID when you're naming or calling it.
Yeah, it's very similar to the class. It works the same way, but like you said, you're just using a hashtag. The key with using an ID is that you only want to use that like one time. So an ID is supposed to be a unique identifier. And so that was where we would use the case of, like, if you want to make all of your divs, or green, right? But then you have this hashtag red class that you use on one of them specifically, right? That's where you would want to use an ID to be like, this is the only case that I want to use this, and it's not going to be green. There's multiple ways to do that too. You could do the same thing with classes. It just, like, I guess, I don't know if you want to show something like that really quick. So we have this red and green class. And say, I don't know. Yeah, that looks ID red. And then, yeah, just take off the red, green.
Shoot there, right there.
Yeah, because you don't have a red class, it ignores it. So now it's pretty much the same thing as a class. I don't know about you, Duran, but I don't know if I've ever really used IDs
I use
in
class.
CSS, because realistically they do the same thing. You can accomplish the same thing with the class, right?
Yeah.
If you just make a separate class that does whatever it is that you wanted it to do.
Exactly.
What if you want to use an ID, but instead of like typing out the name of the color, you use like the hashtag and then the number? Do you have to put 2 hashtags?
No, so if you, I see what you're saying. So on our red, instead of writing red, let me see.
Class name has to start with a lowercase letter, doesn't it?
I don't know. Actually, I don't think there is a rule. Maybe not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just case sensitive. the ID. So whatever case you have is sensitive. But to answer your question, so if we go on line 6, and instead of saying color red, put in the hex code that I posted in the chat. It's just a dark red, so FF 4 zeros. And it does the same thing. So to answer your question, technically there's 2 hashtags, but since it's on 2 separate things, right? Your hashtag for your ID, and then the color and the hex code that it takes. Does that make sense?
So is hashtag red just like the ID name?
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
Red
okay.
is the ID name. Yeah, and I guess we probably should have. I guess we could have called it something else. It's not actually saying that that's color. You can change, if you change hashtag red to hashtag some ID, right? Or yeah, ID red, and that's class green. It's whatever you want to call them. There's no specific, like it needs to be this or that. It's whatever name, it's just a name to give to that. And so that you can reference it later in your code.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep. That's a good question though.
Okay, or any more questions? All right.
Yeah, and that's what we just talked about, combining classes with IDs. This is where it gets a little confusing. This is what we got tripped up on earlier. So specificity rules. This is basically saying like you can apply, as we've went over today, there's 3 different kinds of styles you can make, right? You can make a style for like your tags, themselves. So in this example, it's using div and then making a background color red. You can make a style for classes, and then you make styles for IDs. And so the question is, which one takes precedence, right? So if I create a div with the class name class and an ID of this ID, what color is it going to be? Right? And you can kind of see the answer at the bottom, but there's a certain order in which the CSS is going to apply this stuff. So number 1 priority is going to be an ID, right? So if there's an ID, it's going to take that color first. So if you want, actually, Duran, if you want to throw this in the thing, and we'll kind of play around with it. I'll show you. Cool. So it's green because the ID is going to take precedence and it's going to be green. So if we take off that ID on line 11, and we're just left with a class and a div style, we're going to go down. It's going to go down to the class level. So the order of precedence is always ID, class, and then your tags. So if you have overlapping styles like we do here, we're changing the background color on the same thing. It's going to take, you're always going to get the ID first, and then the class, and then the tag. Does that make sense? That may be a really confusing, and that's okay. It is kind of difficult to understand how that might work.
Okay. So we discussed the rules. IDs, classes, and tags.
And then at the bottom, there's just those things to remember. These are a couple good notes. When you're doing classes and IDs and stuff in your code, they have to match. They have to be the exact same. So you can't, an ID like too cool you can't start it with a number 2. You have to use the actual text for an ID. Also, you can't contain a space for a name, like for a class. So the class cannot be Cool Space Kid, it has to be something else. Because, and the reason for that is that's how you apply multiple classes to the same tag. Because what this is going to read as, if you do Cool Space Kid, excuse me, it thinks you're trying to find a class called Cool and a class called Kid. So you can't start your IDs of classes with a number, and you can't put spaces in them either. I think where are we at the commenting? I think we'll stop there in terms of things to go over today. Okay. Are there any questions or things you want to see or are curious about what we went over today? We kind of went through a lot.
Is the thing in like the quotation marks just the name?
Yes. Yeah. So you give your style a name when you define it, or your class, in this, like a class or an ID, you give them a name. And then whenever you want to use it, the thing in those quotation marks is just which name you want to use.
Oh, okay. And do we just
So-
put it at the top? Like
Yeah,
whenever we name it.
Yeah, so when you're defining these classes and their styles, it goes inside of the head block, and then there's that style block that lives in there. So it goes your HTML head and then style, and then inside of that is where you're going to put all of your definitions.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
That's a good question, though.
Any more questions?
Let's see. Take a quick look at some examples for next week. Okay, yeah. So for next week, what I'd like you guys to do is, if we go to the CodeHS stuff, we went through a couple of examples, but let's, can you pull up the assignments? Yeah. So inside of CSS, if you go to 3.3, CSS select by class, go ahead and try to go through these exercises. It's going to continue on the endangered animal one, but especially the 3.4 and 3.5. It'll help with the like class selection and stuff that we just talked about. Because again, it's a pretty big part of what CSS actually does. And then also 3.4, same thing, select by ID. Feel free to go through those exercises. It'll really help get a better understanding of exactly what they do. And then if you're going through those and you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Because yeah, I think next week the plan is probably to go over some review and maybe get into some more in-depth examples of how we can utilize these classes and IDs in a more complex site, and try to see how they work together when you have a lot more things showing on the screen and stuff. But yeah, I think if you guys don't have any questions, I think that's all for this week. Everybody have a good week and hope to see you next week.
Thanks for coming.